Today our gospel lesson comes from the 10th chapter of John, and I always kind of have to laugh. Are any of y'all farmers? Okay. Well, this is another farm. Okay, your husband. So this is another farmer kind of story, but I think it has such rich and deep meaning for us, even in this day. So let's hear from John 10 as we hear Jesus talking about sheep keeping. I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he's brought out all that are his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep will follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. But I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and he will go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. And I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know my Father, and I lay down my life for my sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life. Jesus went on and said, I did tell you, but you do not believe. The miracles I do in my Father's name speak for me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. God's word for God's people. Thanks be to God. I know a few of you probably have a similar situation that I have in my household. My husband's hearing has changed over the years. More than just the typical not listening. God's working on those eardrums even now. And there was a story out of a guy who had the same situation. And this guy felt like his wife could not hear a thing he said. And then she was getting hard of hearing. So he called their doctor and said, Doctor, my wife's hearing is getting really bad. I'd like to bring her in so you can check it. And the doctor said, fine, it'll be a couple weeks before I can get her in to test her. So in the meantime, let me give you a little experiment to do. He says, here's what you do. You stand about 40 feet away and you speak in a normal tone and see if she hears you. And if she doesn't respond, come up to about 30 feet and say the same thing again. And if she doesn't hear you, come up another 10 feet till you're about 20 feet away from her and speak to her again. If not, get down to 10 feet and see if she can respond. So one night the wife was busy in the kitchen making the dinner. She was a good little wifey and she's in there cooking. And he's in the living room. And he thought, oh, I have the perfect opportunity here to begin the test. So he spoke to her. He was about 40 feet away. And he said, honey, what's for supper? No response. So he moves a little closer to the other end of the living room and he says again, honey, what's for supper? No response. So he moves into the dining room to get even closer. Honey, what's for dinner? And no response. So he moves right up behind her. And he says it again, standing right behind her. Honey, "What's for supper?" And she turns around and she says, "For the 5th time, it's chicken." Some of y'all are living it. I can hear it in your life. I'm living it too. But is that not what happens to us in our lives sometimes? Isn't that really what maybe this story is trying to tell us? Is it that we're deaf to what's going on? Are we failing to really perceive what reality is around it? Or are we so busy thinking it's the other person's problem, we can't realize it's our very own? I think sometimes, just like married couples know, we have selective hearing. You know, you hear what you want to hear from your husband, like those magic words, "Let's go out to dinner." Okay? You hear what you want to hear, but you don't hear everything that's being said. Because sometimes our attention is in lots of different places. Or maybe even when somebody is looking right at you and you're speaking to them, you can tell they're not hearing a word you're saying, because all you've got is their eye attention, and they're not really listening and hearing what you have to say. And I know when that happens to me, it makes me feel very antsy. I feel like I might as well just shut up. This person is clearly smiling at me, but not listening. And if I've done that to you, or I look at you, and I didn't really listen like I should, I'm sorry. I think we all do it once in a while. Today's passage reminds us that listening and hearing is so important for us as Christians in order for us to follow the voice of Jesus. So just picture the scene. Jesus here, he's got a small group of people around him, you know, and this small group of people are maybe a little bit like the husband in that story. They're walking with him, they're right next to him, and they still ask him very plainly, "Are you the Messiah?" They haven't heard what he's been telling them. They even went so far as say, "Don't keep us in suspense." And we know the story. We know how many times Jesus has told them over and over again that God had sent him, that he was the Messiah. And yet Jesus asked them right back, "What do you mean? What more can I say to you? What do I need to say for you to hear me? And do I need to say anything? Because my works will speak for themselves." And so sometimes I wonder, when we're hard of hearing, is it especially when we're trying to listen to Jesus? Do we listen to his voice, and are we hearing what he says, but then just doing what we want to do? Or do we hear his voice and make a conscious decision that whether it's emotional or intellectual or political, that we really don't want to respond to what we hear? And maybe it's because every day we hear so many voices. We hear so much talk. We are so overwhelmed with conflicting kinds of opinions and stories and situations. It does get to feel very overwhelming. And so how do we discern which voice to hear, which voice to listen to? You know, somebody's always trying to tell you who you are, or what you are, or what you should be. But what voice are you listening to? There are voices that tell us, "Do this, don't do that." They tell us, "You're too fat, you're too skinny." They'll tell us, "You'll never amount to much." There are voices that tell you to believe this, buy this, drive that, wear this, go there. Is it too much, do you think? No wonder we just turn it off sometimes. But the essential question remains: whose voice are you listening to? What voice do you trust? What voice do you hear? I know many of you have been in the room. The first time a mother has spoken and her child has heard her voice, and instinctively that baby's head will turn to the place where the voice was spoken, the voice that baby knows. And we know that physicians have taught us and told us many times that the last sense to leave a person as they're dying is their hearing. And that's why we're encouraged to keep telling our loved one how much we love them, giving them permission to let go and to go ahead. And that's why we cry and we pray and we sing hymns of faith so that they can hear a voice that reassures them that our Heavenly Father is waiting to welcome them home to their home eternal. And I know in this detail that we hear in this passage today, when Jesus says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." See, it's not so much about us knowing Jesus, but more about Jesus knowing us. The sheep don't have to intellectually know that it's Jesus. They don't have to have the theological ability to get to know Jesus so they can follow him. They just know. And so I ask you, what voice are you listening to? What are you hearing? I believe if you are intentional about listening to the voice that is the voice of love and the voice of power, if you hone in and turn your listening dial up to the most sensitive setting, the most deepest and authentic voice that you know, and follow that voice, I think one day you may even surprise yourself when you realize that is the voice of Jesus speaking to you. And I think these words are words that many of you here today will hear. I think people who instinctively do the right thing and live a life that is worth living, a gentle life, powerful lives of service and joy and hope and giving and yearning and learning. I think there are those among us who instinctively hear the voice of Jesus speaking into their lives. And they don't do these things to earn their way into heaven. They are just living life as they know and are able to tune out the noise and hear the voice of the Master. And I think when we can hear these voices, we're in the midst of the mess we sometimes get ourselves into, the way we sometimes get ourselves so worked up. We need to do what St. Benedict reminded us, to listen with the ears of our hearts. The ears of our hearts never need a hearing aid, for the voice of the Master is clear. And yet, when I listen to the voices sometimes of people I love and care for deeply, and they seem to be saying things that are at such odds with what Jesus said, what Jesus taught, it's easy to get worked up. And I want to start arguing and try to show that there's another side to what they're saying. Maybe that's kind of what's making America into such a partisan country. We have people who've stopped listening to one another. They get firmly entrenched on one end or the other, conservative versus liberal. It seems like on every issue, we don't listen well to the other side. How many of us have families that are even very divided on their ideological issues? And I'm reminded that the solution is not just to talk, but it's to listen and let love unite us. Because that love that unites us should be bigger than the opinions that divide us. That we take in, that the ear needs to hear, needs to first be translated by our hearts. Because the hearts will filter out the noise and the confusion and the differing opinions that surround us. Because a heart that's grounded in fear is going to shape the way you hear and the way you live. And a heart that's grounded in suspicion will make you skeptical of what you hear and will shape your outlook. When we hear fear, hatred, and suspicion in some areas of our life, it begins to shape all of our reality. And sometimes we wonder, how can such nasty kinds of opinions be part of my life And how do I avoid being swayed by these opinions? I sometimes wish when I read the Bible and I turn to the Gospels and I see the words of Jesus in red, when I see those red letter words of Jesus, I wish I could turn my hearing so that only those red letter words were all that came into my ears and all that came into my heart. I'd love to have red letter hearing. So what does Jesus say to you? No matter what your politics are, we are the church. We are the community that's not shaped by unity of opinion, but in our unswerving desire to listen and follow Jesus. So hearing Jesus, listening to Jesus, is the most important thing we've got to do. And for Christians, there is no other voice that can take precedence. What we hear on Sundays, in the reading of the Word, the raising of prayers, and even in the holy silence that sometimes happens on Sunday, is so rich. And I hope you hear in that silence, in the words of God, in the singing of hymns, I hope you hear how loved you are. And so what voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Do you hear a voice of hospitality, that you are welcome here, and you don't have to know the Bible backwards and forwards, because everyone is welcome here? What voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Do you hear the voice of generosity? You've been given the wonderful gift of life, and the very stuff created order has been shared with you. That you're alive, you're gifted, and you're important just because of who you are. Are you listening and following the words of Christ that call you to be generous with your time and your talents and your time? Are you generous with your joy, with your laughter, with affirmations, and with truth? What voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Do you hear the voice of justice and compassion? That it is good to have that idea in your head that you treat others as you wish to be treated? Are you listening to make sure children have enough food? Are you listening to hear that the homeless have a place to stay? Are you listening to make sure the sick get cared for? What voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Do you hear the sounds of creation and of hope? Are you really listening to move your heart towards that voice? And if so, then how can fear and suspicion have any part of your life? Because you know deep down inside your very soul that something intuitive and real is that hope is better than hate. What voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Listen intently. Follow closely the voice of hospitality and of grace and of joy and of hope and liberation and restoration. And don't just take my word for it. For the voice of love and joy that Jesus speaks is for you. What voice do you hear? Whose voice are you following? Because Jesus is speaking to you, and he's not telling you that chicken is for dinner.